Gettysburg Museum of History Studios.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, patrons. How are you today? You are in for a treat because we're doing something a little bit different, and we're doing something a little bit different with one of your brethren, a fellow patron, Kenneth Gavin. And today we're talking about, I like the title of this, 77 years before. Not only does it rhyme, but it's also going back to what Lincoln is hearkening back to, and it's just a wonderful circle, or I don't even know what the hell you call it, what kind of shape it would be. But regardless, Ken is here. Ken has done a lot of stuff. It's a very long resume, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I did highlight some parts here that I think will make you believe what he says here. He's been a living historian, and he's a reenactor for over 2 decades, and he's had substantial experience with living history, public education, and reenactment programs relative to the American Revolution and the Civil War. He planned, staged, executed, and commanded living history programs and reenactments at the local and national level. Currently, he's the commander of the recreated Spencer's Additional Regiment of the Continental Line, with over a decade of experience as a commanding officer. At Valley Forge National Park, he served as a historic consultant and reenactor coordinator for a new interpretive film for the National Park Service, which replaced the film that has been there since the 80s. It's about time. Yeah. For 16 seasons, he's conducted some substantive tours of Valley Forge National Historical Park for a broad demographic of visitors, responsible for coordinating several living history programs in conjunction with the National Park staff to commemorate the arrival of the Continental Army. That's page 1. Page 2, teaching American history grant programs funded by the United States Department of Education, is director of field study and fellowship program at the American Institute for History Education. He served as lead project manager for approximately 60 teaching. Wait, you said you're my age?
Yeah.
I've done absolutely nothing with my life.
We're both 39 forever, man.
That's right, we are. Oversaw planning, implementation, and logistics for approximately 450 professional development sessions each year. He's done keynote addresses, panels, and documentary appearances. You might have seen Eyewitness to the Battle of Princeton and Determined to Persevere, the Valley Forge encampment. He is the vice president of the Princeton Battlefield Society and also the Spencer's Additional Regiment of the Continental Line. That's page 2. And most interestingly, he's a model. He has his own signature look like blue steel, but he calls it cold gray, and he's modeled for Don Troiani and our friend Trexler Historical Art, as well as the Museum of the American Revolution in Pottsgrove Manor. Oh, God. Kenneth, thank you for being a patron, and welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
To Addressing Gettysburg.
Matt, I'm delighted to be here. I have listened for a long time, and I have to tell you, the moment is kind of surreal.
Really?
I appreciate. Yes, it is.
Oh.
I appreciate you highlighting the resume and bringing some things out. And that's all.
I appreciate you going along with my grandfather's silly, corny joke to pronounce it resume.
You know what?
Keeping his memory alive.
When in Gettysburg or Gettysburg, depending on the debate.
Which do you say?
I say Gettys now. Well, there's a reason for that, and we might get into it later. And that's one of our town's founder, James Gettys. He is listed in Revolutionary Returns with a different spelling, and I think it's just because it's phonetics. I think he was spelling the name Gettys, but the rolls and returns in the 1st Pennsylvania Regiment is Geddes that is listed as there. So Gettys.
Really?
Yeah, and who am I to argue with?
But how do we know it's really him?
Well, that's according to the excellent research done by Melissa Gettys and Amanda Howlett, and we've written extensively on that, and ACHS had published that. And isn't Tim Smith saying we should say Gettysburg now?
Yes, Tim likes to be... We did an episode with Tim called, I think it was just Myth Busting with Tim Smith, because he loves bursting people's bubbles. And I think he likes to be a contrarian. He's trying to get this movement going to call Lower Culp's Hill Spangler's Hill, because technically Spangler owned it during the battle. And I don't disagree with that, but it's been Lower Culp's Hill for forever. And in the minds of Americans that know anything about it. It's Lower Culp's Hill, and there's just certain things that are hard to change just because they're correct. So I don't know. I think it's Gettysburg because people see the why.
Right.
And
well, no matter what you say, Matt, it's home for many of us, isn't it?
It is.
And while I'll do Gettysburg, and I may slip into a Gettysburg here and there, as for the Lower Culp's Hill thing, cool.
I think for today, it wouldn't be out of the question, since we're talking about the Revolutionary period, to refer to it as Gettysburg.
Right.
Okay? Because let's say it was Gettysburg at the time, or well, that wasn't at the time, but let's say it was pronounced Geddes, James Geddes. And then it was Gettysburg. And then eventually, through the years, as the popular imagination grabbed hold of it, it just became Gettysburg, and that's what we call it now. So let's pretend that it once was originally pronounced that way, and we'll make you and Tim very happy.
Very good.
Okay.
All
so
right.
so let's get into this here then.
Sure.
407 years before is the title of today's show, which I love.
I'm glad you like that.
Go into the political similarities between 1776 and 1860s. I mean, you know, the Confederates especially harken back to that. I'm sure the Union did too, but the Confederates really seemed to latch on to the Revolutionary period in their imagery and propaganda and all that other stuff. Yes?
Yeah, they do. And I think, for both sides, as it becomes very clear that there's going to be a military conflict, that we're going to engage in civil war, both sides have a philosophical need to claim that they are the true successors, the true torchbearers to the founding period of the nation. They are compelled to do that sort of thing. And Jefferson Davis, in his first inaugural address, says it outright. Basically, what the Southern states are doing, they are merely asserting a right which the Declaration of Independence of 1776 had defined to be inalienable.
Right.
And he goes on to sort of, make this legalistic argument that, well, the states are always sovereign, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish here. If you were to take a look at the articles of secession for each of the states that will formally secede from the Union, every one of them reads almost like a mini Declaration of Independence. Sure. They're just mimicking what has been said in 1776, and they're making slight tweaks to it. When the Confederacy establishes its own constitution, it's almost a mirror image of the U.S. Constitution, with the exception that it is specifically making allowance for slavery to continue on.
No, wait. So this is the problem that I have. Let's take slavery out of it for a second, and just everything else that you just said, right? And even in the movie, Gettysburg, where Pickett complicates the obvious and trivializes the momentous, this is where I'm torn on the Confederates. Mm-hmm. I don't believe anybody should be compelled to stay where they are not happy, where they are not comfortable, where they feel that they are being violated in some way or another, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine today we said, ladies, there's no more divorce in the United States of America. Like, think about that. Like, if we told people, you cannot get divorced, you cannot get out of a bad situation. Are you abused? Sorry, you can't get out. You have to stay and suffer that abuse, whether it's real or imagined, right? You have to stay. So the Union argument to the secession is, we don't care that you're not happy. You have to stay here. You have to stay here, and you have to like it. That's the way I see it. I think that's the way they saw it. Where they lose me is the big thing that they don't like is that the rest of the country seems to be realizing, maybe you shouldn't own people. Maybe that's not a good idea to own people. And they're like, oh, I don't like that. My rights are being violated. And I think that, had it been any other point or argument, right? I think even today they might still have some sympathy from people, but I think they lose me for sure when it's on the issue of owning people. Mm-hmm. I don't think you should do that. It's just wrong. But my point is, though, why was it okay for our founders to do it, but it's not okay for those within the Union to do it if the Union becomes a usurper of rights like the king was.
Right. Well, and there's a debate: is the king really usurping rights?
Well, I would say no.
Right. And I think as we dig into this, you'll see that.
And by the way, I would also say Washington, not George, Washington, D.C. the federal government was not usurping rights leading into the Civil War.
I agree with you entirely.
I think it's all propaganda.
It is all propaganda because it all goes back to the connective thread of maintaining a slavery economy.
Right.
If you look at what Lincoln is saying in the late 1850s during the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and this topic of slavery is coming up, I think there's an acknowledgement there that from a moral and ethical standpoint, the institution is abhorrent, and I think experience has shown that to Lincoln over the course of his life. But when he's talking about how do we remedy this ill within society, he's not giving time frames for it. He's saying things like, I don't know how that will happen. This could take up to 100 years at that point in time. Preservation of slavery, without a doubt, is what the Confederacy is aiming for.
Sure.
Could an argument be made that an individual soldier on a battlefield is fighting and thinking of that? I think you'd be hard pressed.
Of course.
But it is the connective thread that underlies absolutely everything that they're going to do. Interestingly, you looked at Davis's inaugural, which is delivered on February 18th of 1861, March 4th of 1861. Lincoln is going to deliver his, and he's going to do the same thing Douglas does. He's going to hearken back to the Declaration, and he's going to say that no, the Union is really the defender of what's been happening there. He'll say that the Union is older than the Constitution. It was formed, in fact, by the Articles of Association in 1774, matured and continued by the Declaration in 1776, further matured, and then the faith of all the then 13 states expressly plighted and engaged that it should be perpetual by the Articles of Confederation, and then he goes on to bring in the Constitution. So Lincoln, as a lawyer, is making, I think, a stronger legal argument there, but both sides are saying we're in the right. Both sides are saying we are the true successors to 1776, and they have to, because you have to motivate a population. And I think the South is struggling outside of the Deep South early on. Secession doesn't happen, boom, all at once like this, where you have all of these Southern states who say, you know what? Yeah, we're out. South Carolina goes first in December of 1860. But as you're moving into 1861, there's some doubt that places like North Carolina or Virginia are going to secede altogether. And during the course of the war, even, you'll see the Confederacy doing things to try to pull in Maryland and Delaware, places that are considered border states. And big level, Maryland invasion in 1862. But even down to smaller level things, a name that may be familiar to some of our listeners with a Gettysburg connection, a brigade commander in the 6th Corps here in 1863, Alfred Thomas Archimedes Torbert. He actually holds commissions in 2 armies at the same time. Not because he wanted a commission from the Confederacy, but he's from Delaware. And Delaware is a border state. And he basically just gets a commission saying, hey, you're a lieutenant in the artillery. And he's like, well, that's crap. I'm going to rip this up because I'm serving the Union. But, they're always trying to pull that in. It's not, it's never immediate. We never, we always look at history and it's easy to fall into the trap of knowing the outcomes and assuming unified responses and missing the complexities. Carl Becker, who was an historian working in the early 20th century, talks about historiography in very simple terms. And historiography, basically the way that we're going to remember events. And Becker says, look, there's an ephemeral event. It's something that happens. There's only one way it could ever happen in space and time. The affirmed version of an event is the story that is told by historians, or it's told through folklore tradition. And over time, that can change quite a bit. And it really lends into how are historical events remembered, how are they manipulated for political causes, and the way the affirmed event of the revolution is being used by both sides politically at the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861, I think is a really good example of that. You also have to remember that with the time period between the American Revolution and the American Civil War is short. It's 78 years from the end of one conflict to the beginning of another conflict.
Almost like from World War II to now.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly where I wanted to go. We just passed the 80th anniversary of the Normandy invasion. So, you and I are of that perpetually 39 age where, World War II veterans were a part of our youth.
Yeah.
We saw them.
Absolutely.
We were among them.
All right. Hey, did you know, girls, Colby, everybody, that there are almost 300 audio shows and almost 100 video shows on our Patreon page?
That's pretty awesome.
Did you know that several respectable licensed Battlefield guides are patrons?
Wow.
But they've asked to remain nameless so as to not ruin their reputation.
That's not true.
Are they embarrassed by you?
Yes, that's the point.
They're not. That's not true.
It's true. Just
No.
ask Ralph or
was
Rob or
Charlie.
Jason. Patreon now allows, or Lewis, I won't say their last names. Patreon now allows you, ladies and gentlemen, to have a 7-day free trial. Now, I could choose whatever level I wanted. I could have chosen the level where you get the least amount of perks, but I said no. I'm going to give them the best value level, which would be the second lieutenant, because you get all of the audio shows for the month. So you get that for 7 days, 7-day free trial. Might go away for a while. I'll bring it back and it'll go away, bring it back. But right now it's there. If you're not sure that you want to join. And it also allows you to purchase individual episodes. This is a new thing that they've allowed. Now I got to go through all the episodes and put them on there. Yeah, and open it up. It's cheaper if you become a monthly member. You can also have annual subscriptions. There's a discount if you do that. And did you know, ladies and gentlemen, that 908 out of 909 college sophomores agree that you can't say you're fully prepared for the guide exam without having consumed all of Addressing Gettysburg's Patreon content. How do you do that? Become a second lieutenant. Guys, these are college sophomores. Okay? They know everything. They know everything. Just watch the news, watch TikTok. They will tell you. That's it. That's it. Go to patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg to become a patron. I was going to say a licensed Battlefield guide. That's not what you become if you do that. Become a patron. Addressing Gettysburg. Patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. Do it. Just do it and make Bethany happy, okay?
Do it.